All you people over here talking about lo-fi this, lo-fi that. Hey, dog, you listen to lo-fi and chill, bro? Are you stocked up on your beats to study too? But one thing that nobody is talking about is trip-hop drums. And that's something that I think that while lo-fi came from a long time ago, one other big component of that is also trip-hop in itself. And the last video that I think somebody uploaded regarding this, to even close to this, was Julian Earl, and then after that it was like A Boy in a Band, maybe. Shout out to those guys for trying to, you know, put trip hop on the map. But yo, so today I'm going to show you guys how to make some old, dusty, crusty, busty drums that sound like this. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind is that my personal taste, as you can see over here on the oscilloscope, there's a lot of transients in that, but typically within older stuff, like for the most part, a lot of those transients are removed, which we'll talk about here in a second. But let's go ahead and just jump into how to make some old, crusty, dusty, busty drums. So the first thing that I have done is I pulled up an instance of Addictive Drums 2. There are a few effects. Don't be intimidated by that. You guys know how this goes. We'll go through each one. But if you don't have Addictive Drums, if you have Superior Drummer, that also helps, or you can use a sample. We should kind of be over this, because on the very first video that I've ever uploaded to YouTube, I talked about how to make like neuro drums and stuff. And granted, that's a little bit outdated, but the same thing applies. All you need is basically just some dry drums of some sort, and that's what this sounds like. That's amazing. Beautiful. So the only thing that there is a little bit of is the tail end on a snare, which is totally fine. If you like need to cheese it, then you can actually like cut a snare out and then push a Transient Shaper sustain up a little bit, so don't worry about that. But everything else is just kind of relatively dry. There is some snare buzz on here, and the only thing to keep in mind is that there is some compression and EQ on the kick, some compression and EQ on the snare, and that's about it. Also, you can see here that my overheads are completely turned down, and there's just a little bit of room on both. Okay, that's like an overall thing. Never mind. I don't know what I'm talking about. So yeah, just some old regular acoustic style drums. They're not hard to find. You can literally go on like freesound.org and find something interesting like that. So once you do that, you want to think about like MIDI stuff, and to get this particular kind of beat, it basically is going to sound like this when it's dry. And to get the swing, one thing that I found that's really helpful or beneficial is if we zoom in, everything is on grid except for 2 beats, and that's this hi-hat right here. Right there. That's the only thing that you need in order to swing that. That's all you need in order to get that kind of swingy drum beat right here. If you want to swing it more, you definitely can. You can break it as much as you want. But the reason why I wanted to cover this is because sometimes, like even for me, if you guys have seen like me complain on the Discord or whatever, sometimes it's really hard for me to figure out how to get like that particular style of swing, especially if you have an affinity towards a different specific one. Like it's really easy for me to make Flying Lotus type beats, because that's what I was listening to like right before I started making music, and that's what I spent all my time trying to do. But with this, just kind of push back that second open hat just a little bit, or sorry, that closed hat. That's it. You can also, I guess you can also push this one a little bit late as well, so these two right here, but it's the same instrument. That's all it is. So yeah, way too much time spent on that. Now let's go ahead and get into the processing. If you're in Bitwig, you're in luck. Well, hopefully you have an upgrade plan. I guess you can still use a beta as well, but Saturator is awesome. This one looks really weird, and I'm not really going to go through the mechanics of it, but the difference between this one is that it's a wave shaper, but instead of like having control, instead of having control over like pulling this outward, you have some knobs that kind of control the quiet and loud parts of the sound. And so basically I'm taking quiet sounds that are at minus 30 decibels and not really doing anything with it, just kind of leaving it there, and then taking the loud parts that's minus 10 decibels, a little bit of knee, you can sharp knee, soft knee, so yeah, just something like that, and pulling the drive up. And the reason why I'm not really going into detail of explaining this kind of thing is honestly, like I know how to use it intuitively, but as far as like what's actually happening, you're basically just controlling the peak levels of the loud and quiet sounds and trying to match something in that way, and I don't really know how to explain that in a deeper way, so I apologize. So the output is right here, and then this little chain thing is normalizing the sound, otherwise it looks like So that's just kind of like it's not necessarily a clipper, but it will normalize the sound in some way. So anyways, just put some saturation on it. If you have Ableton, do a soft sine. If you don't have Ableton and you have like Saturn, that would be totally fine too. I'd recommend tape saturation and just boost the gain or the output a little bit. All right, so the next thing that we're doing on this is not a whole lot. I boosted the attack by 16%. You can't even tell, and the only reason why I knew that is because I can look at the bottom of the screen. There is some sustain that is being reduced on here by minus 27%. And that's just trying to control a little bit of that tail because we have that ringy style snare that's kind of flowing out. The next thing that we have is an OTT. I like the X for Records ones because boohoo, I'm not using Ableton. Just use Ableton if you have it, it's totally fine. And I've just kind of turned the depth down to like 24%. This one is going to make a big difference if you want to make it crusty and dusty. If you don't have this, it's totally fine. Don't go buy it. Just go get isotope vinyl. It's absolutely free. And I think that Bitwig, like with the new like color sound thing or whatever that they just came out with not too long ago, they have a tape machine. So the big thing that you're looking for is the wow and lo-fi, and you can just add a compressor on the end, but this will kind of give it a little bit of warping. So that's the difference between that. There's a free tape machine actually on Max for Live devices, and I think that it's a free one. It's called Tapeify. I don't know if it's still available or not, but you can find it there. So next up we have Glue, which is a glue compressor. I miss Ableton. No, I'm just kidding. I don't. I really don't for the most part. But this is just soft clipping this and just kind of boosting the makeup gain to where you see this peaking in red just ever so slightly. And then next up we've got some EQ, and this is going to kind of cut the low end frequencies and the high end frequencies off to make it more lo-fi-ish. And so like the thing with lo-fi, or the thing with trip hop and lo-fi actually, is that you want to figure out a sweet spot with cutting the drums but not making it sound like it's filtered. And that's probably like the hardest thing that you're going to find with this, is what frequencies can I get away with cutting. On this one, I think that I did pretty okay with about like 14K and just doing a relatively soft roll, and then 60 hertz, let's just say, kind of rolling that off a little bit as well. And that's just enough to where it's not sounding too filtered. So the soothe is entirely optional. You guys don't really need that. You can just use a multi-band compressor if you like, or you can use another instance of multi-band dynamics or OTT or FabFilter Pro MB. But soothe 2 is just kind of taking out some of the harshness of this, and you'll see in these little like cool little notches. You almost can't tell the difference, to be honest. It just gives you that little bit of an edge, so don't disregard that. You don't really need that. This is also free. It's called G-Clip, and not to be confused with something else. But what this is a clipper, and this is actually going to help you control the dynamics, or sorry, the peaks of your actual sound. And it's different. Baphometrics had a really great video on that. If you just because you throw a soft clip function on something, like let's say a saturator or the glue compressor, it doesn't actually tame the peaks of some of these things. So whenever you use a dedicated clipper, then it will actually cut these little centipede legs off and help control this a little bit better without making it sound like the volume is reduced. And that's kind of what you're going for. And even if you do reduce it a little bit, you can do what we did right here and boost that up with a FabFilter Pro L2, which is just a limiter. So just turn the makeup gain up. I have mine set to punchy with a long attack and short release. Some nice old school sounding doofages. After that, I bounced it out and did two more things. Yeah, two more things. So the first thing is that I've gone and taken out some more filtering, and I actually cut this at 6.15 kilohertz or G7. That's kind of cool that it will tell you the little thing. You guys see that at the bottom? Sorry. And then I've added a little bit of bit crushing. And that's kind of optional how much you want to cut that or how old you want to make it sound, but that seems to have done the trick for me, and I think that that kind of worked out pretty well. One final thing that I mentioned before, don't worry about this, one final thing that I mentioned before is that a lot of old school trip hop actually has a lot of their transients reduced. So if you listen to stuff like Silent Hill music and all that, like it's usually toned down a lot. So while I like my drums being like overly punchy, imagine me like putting my head right next to the drum kit or something. It's just how I like my music. A Transient Shaper, turning down the attack will kind of give you that more smoothed out drum vibe. And so whatever one you want to do is at your discretion, but that's kind of, I tend to like it without. I just wanted to try to match it to a reference tune before I actually went and did my own thing, because it kind of helps to understand, you know, what that actually sounds like, as opposed to, you know, just doing your own thing. There's nothing wrong with either one, so do whatever the flip you want. So yeah, this whole beat in context, it's not really something that I'm going to keep doing, but it's just a nice little like yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's cool. It's a little dry, but anyways, that's pretty much all there is to how to make some trip hop drums. If you guys have any questions, then hit me up in the Discord and all that stuff, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have fun with this and make some trip hop. It needs to come back. I miss that stuff.